Welcome to round 3 of the RSPK Throwback tournament, held at Full Group Games. I just wanted to jump in before we get into this week's video. Thanks for all the feedback on last week's video. I've already recorded all of the audio for RSPK, so we won't be seeing any changes in this RSPK series. However, we might see changes into the 2010 videos. Thank you again for all the feedback. Let's get back to the video. On the left we have Marshall, piloting Flygon EX. Marshall's deck aims to attack with Flygon EX, dealing significant amounts of damage to the active while softening up the rest of the opponent's board with the sand damage Pokebody. On the right we have Ian, piloting Gardevoir EX. Ian's game plan is to use Gardevoir EX's Imprison Pokepower to shut down the opponent's Pokepowers while pressuring the active with Flame Ball and move energies around to a suite of tech attacking options with Gardevoir's Energy Jump Pokepower. Marshall wins the flip and starts us off. He passes to Ian. Ian draws for turn and plays Holland Transceiver, searching his deck for a Holland supporter, revealing Holland Mentor. He plays Holland Mentor, discarding Windstorm, searching his deck for 3 basic Pokemon with 100 HP or less, finding Ralts, Pidgey, and Holland's Magnemite, benching both Ralts and Pidgey, and attaching Holland's Magnemite to Cast Form. He attacks with Cast Form's Delta Draw, drawing 2 cards. Marshall draws for turn and plays Holland Transceiver, searching his deck and finding Holland Mentor, playing it, discarding Pokemon Retriever. He finds Pidgey, Trico, and Holland's Magnemite. He benches both Pidgey and Trico, and attaches Holland's Magnemite to Cast Form. He attacks with Cast Form's Delta Draw, drawing 3 cards. Ian draws for turn, and benches Magma's Numel. He plays Rocket's Advent, with both players shuffling their hands into their decks, and drawing 6 cards. He evolves Ralts into Kirlia. He benches Jirachi, and attaches a Warp Energy to it. He retreats into Jirachi, and uses Make-A-Wish, searching his deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of his bench, finding Pidgeotto, and evolving Pidgey, putting a damage counter on Jirachi. Marshall draws for turn, and plays Holland Transceiver, searching his deck, finding Holland Researcher, playing it, discarding Windstorm, searching his deck for Sceptile EX, and putting it into his hand. He plays Rare Candy, evolving his bench Trico into Sceptile EX. He plays another Rare Candy, evolving his bench Trapinch into Flygon EX. He attacks with Delta Draw, drawing 3 cards. Ian draws for turn, and evolves his benched Pidgeotto into Pidgeot, using the Quick Search Pokepower, searching his deck for a card, putting it into his hand. He plays Holland Adventurer, discarding Delta Gardevoir EX, drawing 4 cards. He evolves Numel into Camerupt, and Kirlia into Gardevoir. He attaches a Fire Energy to Gardevoir and passes the turn. Marshall draws and plays Holland Mentor, discarding Delta Rainbow Energy, searching his deck, finding Trapinch, and 2 Holland's Cast Form, putting them into his hand. He benches Trapinch, and uses Delta Draw, drawing 4 cards. Ian draws for turn, and uses Quick Search, searching up a card into his hand. He plays Holland Scientist, discarding a Fire Energy, drawing until he has the same number of cards in hand as Marshall, drawing 7 cards. He attaches a Warp Energy to Delta Gardevoir, and uses the Energy Jump Pokepower, moving Warp Energy from Jirachi to Camerupt. He uses Camerupt's Overheat Pokepower, attaching a Fire Energy from his discard pile to Camerupt, putting 2 damage counters on it. He ships the turn. Marshall draws and plays Holland Transceiver, searching his deck, revealing a Holland Adventurer, playing it for turn, discarding Pidgeot, and drawing 3 cards. He evolves Trapinch into Vibrava, and attaches a Psychic Energy to Flygon. He attacks with Delta Draw, drawing 4 cards. Ian draws for turn, and plays Holland Transceiver, returning Holland Mentor from his discard pile to his hand. He uses Pidgeot's Quick Search, searching his deck for a card, putting it into his hand. He plays Holland Mentor, discarding Windstorm, searching his deck, finding 2 Holland Cast Form and a Ralts, putting them into his hand. He attaches Cast Form to Camerupt, returning Warp Energy to his hand. He benches Ralts. He uses Energy Jump Pokepower, moving a Fire Energy from Camerupt to Jirachi, using Make-A-Wish, searching his deck for Kirlia, evolving his bench Ralts, putting a damage counter on Jirachi. Marshall draws for turn and plays Rare Candy, evolving Pidgey into Pidgeot. He evolves Vibrava into Flygon. He uses the Quick Search Pokepower, searching his deck and putting a card into his hand. He plays Swoop Teleport, exchanging Holland's Cast Form with Trapinch, discarding Cast Form. He attaches Holland's Cast Form to Trapinch, returning a Holland's Magnemite to his hand. He uses Flygon's Delta Supply Pokepower, attaching a Delta Rainbow Energy to Flygon EX. He plays Rocket's Advent, with both players shuffling their hands into their deck and drawing 6 cards. He evolves Trapinch into Flygon EX with Rare Candy. He ends his turn. Flygon's Sand Damage Pokebody triggers, putting a damage counter on each of Ian's benched basic Pokemon between turns. Ian draws for turn and plays Professor Elm's Training Method, searching his deck for an evolution Pokemon, revealing Gardevoir, putting it into his hand. He uses Quick Search, searching his deck for a card, putting it into his hand. He retreats into Magma's Camerupt and uses Overheat, attaching a Fire Energy from his discard pile to Camerupt, putting 2 damage counters on it. He attaches Holland's Cast Form to Gardevoir, returning Warp Energy to his hand. He attacks with Flame Ball, dealing 50 damage, and moving an energy to his benched Kirlia. Sand Damage triggers between turns, putting a damage counter on both of Ian's benched basic Pokemon. Marshall draws for turn and uses Quick Search, putting a card from his deck into his hand, and he plays Warp Point, with Ian switching into Cast Form and Marshall switching into his other Flygon EX. He plays Holland Transceiver, returning Holland Mentor from his discard pile to his hand, discarding a card and playing it for turn. He searches up an Absol EX and 2 Holland's Cast Form, putting him into his hand. He benches Absol EX, using a Cursed Eyes Poke Power, moving 3 damage counters from Jirachi to Magma's Camera. He attaches a Holland's Cast Form to Flygon EX, returning an energy to his hand, reattaching it with Flygon's Delta Supply Poke Power. He attacks with Flygon's Psychic Pulse, taking the knockout on Cast Form and dealing 10 damage to each of Ian's damaged benched Pokemon, taking a knockout on Magma's Camera. Sand damage triggers between turns, putting a damage counter on Jirachi. Ian promotes Pidgeot and draws for turn. He uses Pidgeot's Quick Search, searching up a card into his hand. He plays Holland Mentor, discarding Rare Candy, searching his deck, finding Lugia EX and 2 Delta Ralts. He benches Delta Ralts and Lugia EX. He attaches a Holland's Magneton to Gardevoir, returning an energy to his hand. He evolves Kirlia into Delta Gardevoir EX, retreating into it, and uses the Energy Jump Poke Power, moving Holland's Cast Form from Delta Gardevoir to Delta Gardevoir EX. He plays POW Hand Extension, bringing up Marshall's benched Sceptile EX. He attacks with Flame Ball, dealing 160 damage thanks to weakness, moving an energy back to Lugia EX, taking the knockout, and drawing 2 prize cards. Marshall promotes Flygon EX, triggering the Sand damage Pokebody between turns, putting a damage counter on each of Ian's benched basic Pokemon. Marshall draws for turn and uses Flygon's Delta Supply Poke Power, attaching a Delta Rainbow energy to Flygon EX. He uses Pidgeot's Quick Search, searching his deck for a card, putting it into his hand. He plays Rocket's Advent, with both players shuffling their hands to their decks, drawing 4 cards. He attaches a Delta Rainbow energy to Flygon. He attacks with Psychic Pulse, dealing 160 damage thanks to weakness, taking the knockout on Gardevoir and dealing 10 damage to each of Ian's damaged benched Pokemon, drawing 2 prize cards. In between turns, Flygon EX's Sand damage Pokebody puts a damage counter on each of Ian's benched basic Pokemon. Ian promotes Pidgeot and draws for turn. He uses Pidgeot's Quick Search, putting a card from his deck into his hand. He plays Pokemon Retriever, shuffling 2 Holland's Cast Form and Holland's Magnemite from his discard pile into his deck. He plays Holland Transceiver, returning Holland Mentor from his discard pile to his hand, discarding a card and playing it for turn, searching up a Kyogre EX, Holland's Magnemite, and a Holland's Cast Form into his hand. He plays Rare Candy, evolving his benched Ralts into Delta Gardevoir. He uses the Energy Jump Poke Power, moving an energy from Lugia EX to Delta Gardevoir. He retreats into Gardevoir and attacks with Psychic Rage, dealing 30 damage to Absol EX. Sand damage puts a damage counter on Jirachi and Lugia EX between turns. Marshall draws and attacks with Psychic Pulse, taking the knockout on Gardevoir and the benched Jirachi, and Marshall wins the game. What a game. Marshall was able to establish an early Sceptile EX, protecting his Flygon and Pidgeot's Poke Powers from Delta Gardevoir EX's Imprison Marker. Though Sceptile adds to the cost of all EX Pokemon attacks, Marshall was able to offset the cost with Flygon's Delta Supply Poke Power, letting him aggress in the early game and outpacing Ian's setup. Ian was able to power up Gardevoir EX and dispatch Sceptile with a well-executed POW Hand Extension. However, Gardevoir's unfortunate psychic weakness meant it didn't stick around for long enough to take advantage of the Imprison Poke Power. The most valuable card in today's game goes to Delta Flygon EX. Flygon was able to provide immense amounts of pressure on the opponent's entire board, softening up the bench with spread damage while having high damage output to the active. Flygon's bulky 150 HP combined with no weakness makes it extremely difficult to dispatch in a single turn, allowing Flygon to rack up sand damage pings while active. Make sure to tune in next time for round 4 of our RSPK Throwback tournament, and check out the streamed rounds over on Tricky Gym, linked in the description. This has been the Holland Scientist. Until next time.